The following is an exclusive presentation of WI Garden Media, the voice of Garden Talk Radio.
Well, Holly, as the spring warms up, sooner or than later, we will be planting tomatoes outside. And there's some things in which one can do in order to help make their tomatoes grow better.
Absolutely. Tomato planting time will be here sooner than we know it for many of us. So you want to think about where you're going to get your tomato seeds or starts from. So maybe you started your own seeds, maybe you ran out of time, maybe your seeds didn't take off like you thought they would. You can go to your local garden center and you can buy your starts and you can grow them. We suggest going to a local garden center because they will have usually a better variety than a big box store, and then they'll have people there to answer questions for you.
And you can plant the seed directly in the ground. You don't need to transplant anything.
No. Growing up, that's what we did. We just put them directly in the ground.
So, but if you do choose to start them and people choose to start tomato plants in order to allow them to have a healthy plant start, and then once they put it in the ground, if it is a 90-day variety till fruit, then the clock starts once you put that transplant in the ground, not when you started it in seed pod or seed tray inside.
Right.
So you want to plant it deep.
Yeah. So you want to plant it up to the 3 inches?
3/4 of the plant underground.
And you want to look at a few things, whether it be your soil. Well, you want your soil temperature and then the long range temperature forecast. So your first 70-degree day, you don't want to just get out there and start planting tomatoes. You want to look at what's going to happen within the next week or so, and then also think about the soil, the actual where you're putting the tomatoes in the ground in the soil.
So, 6 to 8 weeks before your last average frost date, it's recommended to start seeds indoors. And then when the time is correct in your area, that's when the long-range forecast shows no more signs of frost, and the soil temperature at root zone is at minimum 50 degrees Fahrenheit at root zone, that meaning about 4 inches deep. Then it's time to plant your tomatoes after you've hardened them off. That's a whole nother process for another conversation. So you want to plant them deep, and when you plant them deep, you want to take and remove all the limbs off the stalk up 3/4 of the way up the plant and leaving the top canopy above the soil. The reason why we plant them deep is...
Well, one is because tomatoes are part of the nightshade family, and if you look at a tomato plant, you'll see these little hairs poking off, and each of those hairs could be potential roots. So when you plant them deep, then those little hairs will grow or become roots, and then those will root the soil and will feed the plant. So that's one thing you want to do. Now, you may think trimming those bottom leaves off might make your plant look a little sad, and yes, but it'll catch up quickly, it'll grow. And there's some beneficial aspects of doing that, and one of them is if you've ever experienced early blight, it is very, very disappointing and sad, and this will help you prevent that.
So you plant the plant deep, and as it grows, you remove the lower limbs in order to keep an air circulation and prevent splash up of the soil that contains early blight. And another way to reduce early blight, in addition to the cutting of the leaves, and is to apply whole grain yellow cornmeal.
Right. So there's this bacteria that lives in your soil. There's good bacteria and all sorts of things in your soil, but the bad bacteria that causes early blight is in there, and early blight happens because the soil splashes up on the leaves of your plants. So what you do is you take whole grain yellow cornmeal, and you, at the time of planting, after you've planted your tomato, you just take a handful and sprinkle it around the base of the plant. And it has a beneficial fungi in it called trichoderma. And trichoderma exists in whole grain yellow cornmeal. So when I say whole grain, you may have to go, when you go to the store, look for at the more organic brands. It's typically not going to be in the store brand. You have to buy the actual brand name. And that will help stop that early blight. You just do that once when you plant them, and then about halfway through the season. And then the next step is to mulch.
Mulching, whether you use chemical-free, seed-free grass clippings, straw, leaves, shredded paper, something to create a barrier between the soil and the leaves, which one holds the moisture in the ground as well as reduces weeds, but also prevents that soil splashing up. So in addition to the whole grain yellow corn meal, the mulch also helps prevent early blight on your tomatoes. I want to go back and we talk about the things we put in the hole at the time of planting, because everybody, Holly, has their own formulation of what they put in that hole. It can be very complicated or it can be very simple.
Right. And some people do have things that their grandparents did and their parents did and blah, blah, blah. Or maybe you have no clue and you're just doing what your neighbor told you to do and you're not really sure why. We just use an all-purpose organic fertilizer, like a 10-10-10 or within that range. Don't hurt yourself going to the store and looking for an exact 10-10-10. Sometimes it might be like an 8-10-4 or something, but just an all-purpose organic fertilizer.
Anything more than a 10-10, you're going to waste money on, because there's not enough time in your growing season for the plant to absorb all the nutrients that fertilizer provides. So keep it under a 10-10-10, 4-6-8 or 4, whatever it is. Organic is best, so that the plant doesn't become dependent and it can use what it needs at the time that it needs it. Now, all of that said and done, we need to support our plants. We need to support our tomato plants.
We need to emotionally support them.
Well, you can emotionally support your tomato plants if you choose
Maybe
to.
your tomato plants emotionally support you.
Right. But we need something structurally supporting of our tomato plants so they don't lie in the ground. If you do not support your tomato plants, you will lose 50% of the fruit that plant produces.
Right. And yeah, you want to, whether you use a cage, a proper tomato cage, or you use something else, whether it be, some people use like those rose cages. Some people just take sticks and use old torn up towels and bed sheets and linens, what have you. We use what's called the Florida weave method, and it works well for us. We have used cages in the past too. There's nothing wrong with that. We even took some old wire netting, what do you call that?
Rubber-coated fencing.
Rubber-coated fencing, and made cages ourselves. So there's a lot of options, but the Florida weave, and we have this on our YouTube channel,
which you can go to our parent website, the WisconsinVegetableGardener.com, type in the search engine Florida weave or tomatoes, and we can, it's very in-depth, multiple videos about that.
Right, and how to grow the best tomatoes is there as well. So the Florida weave, you just take about a 6 to 8 foot pole or T-post, yep. And you put that at the end of each row on both sides, so on both sides of each row. And then you take your twine and at about every foot from the base of the plant, you string it across 2 strings next to each other. And then what will happen is you can guide the tomato through those strings, and you do them about foot increments until you get to the top, I guess.
Yeah.
And then that way it'll support the tomato as it's growing. Yeah,
the tomato hangs on that string to allow the support. And because you're not using cages, you can actually get a few more tomatoes in that row, because sometimes if you can plant tomatoes tighter than what is recommended, but the cages prevent you from getting any closer. But with the Florida weave, you have the availability to expand a little bit. You can do single stem. You can let them grow naturally for determinate or indeterminate tomatoes. Works very well. That's a lot of information in a very short time. Again, you can go to our parent website, the WisconsinVegetableGardener.com, and type in tomatoes in the search engine, and multiple videos will come up with an in-depth visualization of how we do this and are successful. The whole grain cornmeal came from a master gardener in Texas, Bob Webster, who's a radio host and an author, and it's been phenomenal ever since we have tried it. We've done it, and we've told people to do it, and they come back a year later going, we thought you were crazy, but we've had the best tomatoes you ever had. So the yellow whole grain cornmeal for preventing early blight works very well. What also works very well, Holly, is what Walton's Incorporated has for all of us.
Yeah, we're brought to you today by our sponsor, Walton's Inc. We know you care about where your food comes from. Walton's Inc. has everything you need to go from the equipment, seasoning, and supplies to make sausage, jerky, and any other meat product your way to your high standards. If you want snack sticks that people will actually like and want to eat, You can go to meatgistics.com to help. It's a website to help educate people on the hows and whys of meat processing, as well as a community of almost 15,000 users who will give their opinion and guidance on meat processing issues. If you go to waltonsinc.com, you can find everything you need from meat grinders, mixers, sausage stuffers to help you go from animal to edible. Walton's everything but the meat. Use code GROW50 to save 10% off of orders of $50 or more at waltonsinc.com. For more information, please visit thewisconsinvegetablegardener.com.